Jai-Ho Park looked at his watch for the fifth time that evening. It was only 8:30 p.m., and he still had 3.5 hours left in his shift at the New York Public Library. Outside the tall windows, heavy snow was falling steadily. The white flakes danced in the light of the street lamps, making beautiful patterns against the dark sky. Inside the library's Grand Rose main reading room, everything was quiet. Most of the visitors had gone home early because of the snow. Only a few students sat at the long wooden tables, their faces lit by the warm glow of the reading lamps. Jai-Ho loved these peaceful moments when he could hear the old building settle around him, its wooden floors creaking softly. At 25 years old, Jai-Ho was the youngest librarian on the night shift. He had moved from South Korea to New York just 2 years ago to follow his dream of working in one of the world's most famous libraries. Tonight, he was in charge of the entire floor, including the precious ancient texts section. As he walked between the tall bookshelves, checking that everything was in order, Jai-Ho noticed something odd. A faint blue light was coming from the ancient texts section. It wasn't the usual white light from the reading lamps or the yellow emergency lights. This light was different. It moved like water on the ceiling. "That's strange," Jai-Ho whispered to himself. He walked closer to investigate. The light seemed to be coming from behind the last row of bookshelves. As he got nearer, the air became surprisingly cold. Jai-Ho pulled his navy blue sweater tighter around himself. Suddenly, all the lights in the library flickered. The few remaining students looked up from their books, startled. Then Jai-Ho heard the heating system make a loud clunking sound before going completely silent. Without the usual soft hum of the heaters, the library felt eerily quiet. Jai-Ho reached for his phone to call maintenance, but the screen was black. He pressed the power button several times, but nothing happened. From the reading room, he heard students complaining that their laptops had stopped working too. The blue light was getting brighter now. Jai-Ho walked around the last bookshelf and stopped in surprise. A book was lying open on the floor, its pages giving off the strange blue glow. He had worked in the ancient texts section for months, but he had never seen this book before. The cover was made of dark leather that looked very old, and the pages seemed to be made of some material he couldn't recognize. Not paper, not parchment, but something else. As Jai-Ho bent down to pick up the book, the blue light pulsed once, very brightly. He heard a soft humming sound, like a tune being played very far away. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The snowflakes outside the windows stopped moving for a moment, hanging perfectly still in the air, as if time itself had paused. Then everything went back to normal. The heating system came back on with a whoosh, the lights steadied, and phones and laptops started working again. The snow continued falling outside, but when Jai-Ho looked down, the strange book was gone. In its place was a small silver disc about the size of a coin, with markings he had never seen before. Jai-Ho picked up the disc carefully. It was warm to the touch and seemed to vibrate slightly in his hand. He looked around the empty ancient text section, suddenly aware that his quiet night shift had turned into something much more interesting. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a remarkable story that would change not only his life, but also his understanding of the library he thought he knew so well. He slipped the silver disc into his pocket, feeling its warmth against his leg. There were still 3 hours left in his shift, and Jai-Ho had a feeling they would be very different from any other night he had spent in the library. The silver disc in Jai-Ho's pocket grew warmer as he walked through the library's quiet halls. The snow outside was falling harder now, covering the library steps with a thick white blanket. The few remaining students had left, not wanting to get stuck in the storm. Jai-Ho was alone in the huge building, or so he thought. As he turned the corner into the history section, he heard a soft beeping sound. It reminded him of a metal detector, but quieter and more musical. Jai-Ho followed the sound, walking softly between the tall bookshelves. There, in a dark corner, he saw someone. A young woman was standing with her back to him. She was wearing what looked like normal clothes, jeans and a white sweater, but she was holding something that didn't look normal at all. It was like a tablet computer, but it was completely clear, like glass. The strange device was giving off a faint blue light, exactly like the light Jiho had seen earlier. "Excuse me, the library is closing soon," Jiho said politely. The woman turned around quickly, hiding the device behind her back. She looked about Jiho's age, with friendly eyes and long black hair tied back neatly. Her name tag said she was Hana Kim, a graduate student. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said. "I was just doing some research." Her voice was calm, but Jiho noticed she was nervous. Her eyes kept moving to his pocket where the silver disc was hidden. Jiho took the disc out of his pocket. "Are you looking for this?" Hannah's eyes widened. "Where did you find that?" she asked. Then she sighed and brought out her clear tablet. "I suppose there's no point in hiding anymore. You've already seen too much." "Who are you really?" Jiho asked. The disc was now pulsing with warmth in his hand. Hannah smiled. "I'm a researcher, but not the kind you're thinking of. I'm part of the Galactic Cultural Preservation Team. We travel across the universe, studying and protecting important cultural sites. Your library is one of them." Jiho looked at her carefully. "You're telling me you're not from Earth?" "That's right," Hannah said. She touched her tablet, and suddenly her appearance flickered slightly, like a TV with bad reception. Her skin had a slight silver shine to it now, and her eyes seemed to change color as she moved. "This is what I really look like, though we prefer to blend in while we work." Outside, the snowstorm grew stronger. The wind howled around the building's corners, and the snow was so thick now that they could barely see the streetlights. "The storm isn't natural," Hannah explained. "We created it to keep people away while we work. We need to scan some very important books in your ancient texts section. Books that contain information crucial to understanding Earth's role in the galaxy." Jiho thought about the strange book he had seen earlier, the one that had disappeared. "Why our library?" he asked. "Because the New York Public Library isn't just a library," Hannah said. "It's one of 12 places on Earth where the boundaries between worlds are thinnest, places where knowledge flows more freely between civilizations. That book you saw earlier, it wasn't meant to be seen by human eyes yet, but somehow you were able to see it. That's very rare." The silver disc suddenly floated out of Jiho's hand and hung in the air between them. Symbols appeared on its surface, glowing with that same blue light. "What does it say?" Jiho asked, fascinated. "It says you're a receiver, someone who can understand and translate knowledge across different civilizations. We've been looking for someone like you for a very long time." Just then, they heard footsteps approaching. Hannah quickly made her appearance return to normal, and the disc dropped back into Jiho's hand. They both turned to face whoever was coming, knowing that their conversation had only scratched the surface of what was to come. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the empty library. Jiho and Hannah watched as an elderly man appeared from between the bookshelves. It was Sun-Woo Lee, the head librarian. He was carrying an old brass key that Jiho had never seen before. "I see you two have met," Sun-Woo said calmly, as if finding a human and an alien talking in his library was perfectly normal. "Please, come with me. There is much to explain, and this is not the best place for such a conversation." Jiho looked at Hannah in surprise. "You know each other." "Sun-Woo has been our Earth contact for many years," Hannah explained as they followed the old librarian through the quiet building. "He helps us protect the knowledge stored here." They walked to a part of the library Jiho had never visited before. It was behind the ancient text section, through a door that looked like it was made of solid wood but opened without a sound. Behind it was a narrow staircase going down. "Watch your step," Sun-Woo said, leading them down. He held up an old-fashioned lantern that gave off a warm, golden light. The walls of the staircase were made of smooth stone, and they felt very old. At the bottom of the stairs was another door. Sun-Woo used his brass key to open it, and they stepped into an amazing room. It was a circular chamber filled with books, scrolls, and strange objects Jai-Ho had never seen before. Some of the books were floating in midair, surrounded by soft blue light. Others were kept in special glass cases that seemed to bend the light around them. "Welcome to the true heart of the New York Public Library," Sun-Woo said. He walked to a large table in the center of the room and placed his lantern on it. "This is where we keep the most important books in human history, and some that aren't from Earth at all." "How long has this been here?" Jai-Ho asked, looking around in wonder. "The chamber is as old as the library itself," Sun-Woo explained. "But the collection is much older. We have books here from every corner of the galaxy, and some from places even Hannah's people haven't visited yet." Hannah walked to one of the floating books and touched it gently. "Earth stories are special," she said. "They have power that we don't fully understand. The way humans tell stories, the way you capture feelings and experiences in words, it's unique in the galaxy." Sun-Woo nodded. "That's why the snowstorm outside is so important. It's not just keeping people away. It's protecting this collection. You see, Jai-Ho, there are others out there who want to take these books, to use their power for themselves. The storm creates a special kind of quiet," Hannah added, "a silence that helps hide the energy of these books from those who might try to find them." Jai-Ho took the silver disc from his pocket. It was glowing brighter now, responding to the energy in the room. "And what about this? What does it mean that I'm a receiver?" Sun-Woo smiled gently. "It means you can help us protect these books. You can understand their stories in a way that most humans can't. That's why you were able to see the book earlier, the one that disappeared. It was testing you." "Testing me for what?" Jai-Ho asked. "To see if you could join us," Sun-Woo said. "To become part of a group that has protected these books for centuries. There are others like us in libraries all over the world, guarding humanity's stories. And the stories of other worlds too." The silver disc floated up from Jai-Ho's hand again, spinning slowly in the air. This time, instead of showing symbols, it projected images around them, libraries in different parts of the world, each with its own hidden chamber, its own collection of extraordinary books, its own guardians keeping watch through the ages. As Jai-Ho watched the images floating around the hidden chamber, a soft chime sounded from Hannah's clear tablet. She looked at it and smiled. "Perfect timing. Our language expert has arrived." The air in the corner of the room shimmered like heat waves rising from hot pavement. A young woman appeared, wearing what looked like ordinary winter clothes, a long gray coat and black boots. She had short black hair and carried a bag that seemed to be made of flowing silver. "This is Mira Choi," Hannah said. "She specializes in understanding how different species tell stories." Myra bowed slightly to Jai-Ho and Sun-Woo. "I came as soon as I could. The storm made it difficult to transport directly into the library. The energy patterns are quite complex tonight." She reached into her silver bag and pulled out something that looked like a small silver earpiece. "This might help us communicate better. It's a universal translator, but it does more than just change words from one language to another. It helps share the feeling and meaning behind the words." Jai-Ho took the device carefully. When he put it in his ear, it felt warm, like the silver disc had. Suddenly, he could understand things in a new way. The books around them seemed to hum with stories, each one singing its own quiet song. "Amazing, isn't it?" Mireille said. "Every story has its own music, its own pattern. But Earth's stories are special. They have layers that we've never seen anywhere else in the galaxy." Sun-Woo walked to one of the floating books and gently brought it down to the large table. "This is a good example," he said. "It's a collection of bedtime stories from a planet called Luminara. Their stories are beautiful, but they're always direct, always clear. Human stories are different. They have hidden meanings, subtle messages, things that aren't said but are still understood." Myra nodded excitedly. "That's why we need receivers like you, Jai-Ho. You can help us understand these layers. Watch this." She took out another device that looked like a small crystal. When she held it up, it projected a story into the air. Not just words, but feelings and images too. The story was about a sunrise on her home world, where 3 suns rose together in a dance of light. Jiho could feel the warmth of the suns, smell the strange flowers that opened at dawn, and understand the complex emotions of Meirei's people as they watched this daily miracle. "Now you try," Meirei said, handing Jiho a book from Earth. "Read a little of it out loud." Jiho opened the book. It was a collection of Korean folk tales he knew from his childhood. As he began to read, the translator device did something remarkable. It didn't just change the words into other languages. It carried the heart of the story across the boundaries between worlds. The chamber filled with the smell of pine trees after rain, the sound of wind through bamboo forests, and the feeling of hearing stories from your grandmother on a cold winter night. Hana and Meirei watched in amazement. "We've never seen a translation this clear before," Hannah said softly. "You're not just reading the words, you're sharing the soul of the story." Outside, the snow continued to fall, creating a peaceful blanket of white around the library. Inside the hidden chamber, surrounded by books from Earth and beyond, Jiho began to understand just how important stories could be, not just for entertainment or learning, but for bringing different worlds closer together. As the feeling of the Korean folk tales faded from the chamber, Sunwoo walked to a special bookshelf near the back wall. This shelf was different from the others. Instead of books, it held small crystal containers, each one containing what looked like moving clouds of light. "It is time," Sunwoo said formally, "to explain the full truth about the guardians of this library." He carefully selected one of the crystal containers and brought it to the central table. "These are memories, preserved through the centuries by those who came before us." He opened the container, and the cloud of light inside floated up and expanded around them. Suddenly, they were no longer in the underground chamber. Instead, they stood in the same library, but it looked much older. The date that appeared in the air showed 1911, the year the library first opened. "I am not just the head librarian," Sunwoo explained as they watched people in old-fashioned clothes walk through the memory around them. "I am part of an order that has protected Earth's stories for over 1,000 years. We call ourselves the Story Keepers." In the memory, they saw a younger librarian receiving a silver disc, just like the one Jiho had found. The librarian's clothes and appearance were different, but the look of wonder on his face was exactly the same as Jiho's had been. "There are 12 main libraries in our network," Sunwoo continued. "New York, London, Alexandria, Seoul, and others. Each one guards different types of stories. Some protect stories of courage, others keep stories of wisdom or love. Our library specializes in stories of discovery and understanding." The memory changed, showing them glimpses of other guardians through the years. Some were working with beings that were clearly not human, sharing knowledge and protecting precious books. Others were turning away people who tried to steal the story's power for themselves. "Every 50 years, Hannah added, we help the guardians choose new people to join their ranks, people who can understand stories the way you do, Jiho. This is why we created the snowstorm tonight. It's not just any storm, it's the choosing storm. It happens only when the time comes to select a new guardian." Meirei stepped forward, her translator device glowing softly. "The storm does more than keep people away. It helps us test potential guardians. The snow carries tiny particles of crystal that respond to a person's ability to understand and protect stories. When you saw the glowing book earlier, the storm had already identified you as a potential guardian." Sunwoo closed the crystal container, and the memory faded away. They were back in the hidden chamber. "Being a guardian is not easy," he said seriously. "We must keep many secrets. We must protect stories that could be dangerous in the wrong hands. But we also get to experience the most amazing stories from across the universe." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old pocket watch. When he opened it, instead of clock hands, it showed a map of lights spreading across the world. These lights are the other libraries in our network. Right now, they are all watching, waiting to see if you will join us. We have not had a receiver as strong as you in over 100 years. The silver disc floated up from Jaiho's pocket again, spinning faster now. The symbols on its surface change, forming new patterns. The disc is responding to the network, Mayray explained. It recognizes you as a potential guardian. But the final choice must be yours, Jaiho. Will you help us protect the stories? Before Jaiho could answer the question about becoming a guardian, Hannah's clear tablet made a soft musical sound. She looked at it with excitement in her eyes. The connection is ready, she said. We can show him the Universal Library now. Mayray took a small silver sphere from her flowing bag and placed it in the center of the room. The sphere rose into the air and began to spin. Suddenly, the walls of the chamber seemed to disappear. Instead, they found themselves standing in an enormous space that seemed to go on forever in all directions. This is the Universal Library, Sunmu explained. It exists between all spaces and times. What you're seeing is just a small part of it, the part that human minds can understand. All around them, stories floated through the air like living things. Some looked like normal books, others were balls of light, and some were shapes that Jaiho's eyes could barely focus on. The silver translator in his ear hummed warmly, helping him make sense of what he was seeing. Every species in the galaxy stores their stories here, Hannah said. She reached out and touched one of the floating lights. It expanded into a giant screen showing a story from her world. But Earth's stories are special. Watch this. She waved her hand, and hundreds of Earth books appeared around them. As they floated by, Jaiho could see that each one gave off a unique pattern of light. Earth stories have healing powers, Mayray explained. When beings from other worlds read them, something amazing happens. She touched one of the books. It was a simple children's story about sharing. When the book opened, waves of gentle light spread out from its pages. This story helped stop a war on a distant planet, Mayray said. The two sides read it together, and it helped them understand each other in a way their own stories couldn't. Sunwoo nodded. That's why we must protect these books. In the wrong hands, their power could be misused. But when shared properly, they help bring peace to the galaxy. Jaiho watched as more books floated past. He saw fairy tales that were used to help heal sick children on other worlds. He saw poems that helped alien species understand human emotions. He even saw some of his favorite Korean stories being used to teach young beings across the galaxy about friendship and courage. The snowstorm outside isn't just hiding us from people, Hannah explained. It's also protecting these connections. She pointed to thin lines of light that connected the books to different parts of the Universal Library. The snow creates a natural barrier that stops others from detecting these pathways between worlds. Mayray touched her translator device, and suddenly, Jaiho could hear the stories singing. Each book had its own song, but together they made a beautiful harmony. This is what you can hear as a receiver, she said. You can understand how the stories connect to each other, how they work together to make the galaxy a better place. The silver disc floated up from Jaiho's pocket again. This time, it moved through the Universal Library like it was searching for something. When it found what it was looking for, it created a new pathway of light connecting several books together. Amazing, Sunwoo said softly. The disc is already showing you how to help us. It's finding new ways to share Earth's stories with those who need them most. The images of the Universal Library faded away as Mayray's silver sphere stopped spinning. They were back in the hidden chamber beneath the New York Public Library. Outside, the snow continued to fall silently, creating a peaceful quiet that filled the building. Hannah stepped forward with her clear tablet. Jaiho, we need to tell you something important, she said. Being a guardian isn't the only choice you have. Our Literary Council has also noticed your abilities. The Literary Council? Jaiho asked, touching the silver translator in his ear. It felt warm against his skin, like it was responding to the importance of this moment. They are the ones who manage the sharing of stories across the galaxy, Mayray explained. They make sure stories are used wisely and reach the people who need them most. They want you to become an ambassador for Earth's stories. Sunwoo placed his old pocket watch on the table. Its face now showed a map of the stars, with tiny dots of light marking different worlds. As an ambassador, you would travel to other planets, he said. You would help different species understand Earth's stories and teach them how to use the story's power carefully. Jai-Ho looked at the star map, then at the books floating around the chamber. But what about being the guardian? Don't I have to choose one or the other? Sunwoo smiled gently. That's what I thought 50 years ago, when I stood where you are now. He waved his hand, and another memory crystal opened, showing a much younger Sunwoo receiving his own silver disc. I was the first person chosen to be both guardian and ambassador. It's not an easy path, but it's possible. What made you choose both? Jai-Ho asked. I realized that stories need both protection and freedom. Sunwoo answered. As a guardian, I keep the stories safe. As an ambassador, I help them reach new worlds and touch new hearts. One role serves the past, the other serves the future. Hannah's tablet displayed images of different worlds where Earth stories had helped solve problems. Each world has its own challenges, she said. Last month, a children's book about forgiveness helped 2 species find peace after centuries of conflict. A collection of poems helped another species understand human emotions like love and hope. But there are also those who want to use the story's power for selfish reasons, Mayray added. They don't understand that stories work best when they're shared freely, not controlled or forced. The silver disc floated up from Jai-Ho's pocket one more time. Now it showed both sets of symbols, those of the Guardians and those of the Literary Council. The symbols danced together, creating new patterns of light. The disc has never done that before, Sunwoo said quietly. It seems to think you could do both jobs well. Jai-Ho watched the symbols dance. He thought about all he had learned tonight, about the hidden chamber, the universal library, and the power of stories to change lives across the galaxy. He thought about his love for books and his dream of helping others understand them better. The snow outside created a perfect silence, as if the whole world was waiting for his answer. Jai-Ho knew that whatever he chose would change not only his life, but also the way stories move between worlds. He looked at Sunwoo, Hana, and Mayray, each of them watching him with hope and trust in their eyes. I choose both, Jai-Ho said firmly. His voice was quiet but sure. Stories need to be both protected and shared. I want to help with both. As soon as he spoke these words, the silver disc began to glow brighter than ever before. It floated up and split into 2 perfect circles, one staying with Jai-Ho and the other moving to hover above the table. The snowstorm outside seemed to pause for a moment, as if acknowledging his decision. Then let us make it official, Sunwoo said. He opened his pocket watch and pressed a hidden button. The watch face projected a circle of light onto the floor. Please step into the circle, Jai-Ho. Jai-Ho stepped forward. The light felt warm around his feet. Hana and Mayray moved to stand on either side of him, while Sunwoo stood in front. The floating books in the chamber arranged themselves in a circle around them. As the current guardian of the New York Public Library, Sunwoo began. I welcome Jai-Ho Park as both guardian and ambassador. May he protect our stories wisely and share them carefully. The first silver disc floated down and attached itself to Jai-Ho's library badge, transforming it into something new. The badge now showed both the library's logo and a pattern of stars that seemed to move when he looked at them. Hana stepped forward with her clear tablet. The Literary Council accepts Jai-Ho Park as Earth's newest ambassador. May he help bridge the gap between worlds through the power of stories. The second disc floated to Jai-Ho's hand and changed into a ring with the same moving star pattern as his badge. When he put it on, he could feel a connection to the Universal Library, like a soft song playing at the edge of his mind. "Your training begins tomorrow," Mayra said with a smile. "You'll learn how to use both tools properly. The badge will help you protect the stories here, and the ring will help you share them across the galaxy." Suddenly, the snowstorm outside began to change. The snowflakes started falling more slowly, and each one caught the light in a special way. Through the library's windows, they could see the New York skyline transforming. Tiny lights appeared between the snowflakes, like stars floating in the city air. "The city is showing its true face to you now," Sunwoo explained. "Those lights are doorways to other worlds. Most people can't see them, but as a guardian and ambassador, you'll learn to use them." Jai-ho walked to the window and watched the magical snowfall. The city he had lived in for 2 years looked completely different now. Between the familiar buildings and streets, he could see hints of other worlds, like paintings showing through thin paper. "Don't worry," Hannah said kindly. "You won't have to do this alone. We'll be here to help you learn both roles. And the stories themselves will guide you too." Mayra touched her translator device one last time. "Listen," she said. Jai-ho closed his eyes and listened. Through his silver translator, he could hear the songs of countless stories from his library, from the Universal Library, from all the hidden places between worlds. Each story had its own voice, but together they made a beautiful harmony. The night that had started with a mysterious blue light had become the beginning of an amazing new chapter in Jai-ho's life. As he stood in the hidden chamber with his new friends, watching the magical snow fall over New York, he knew that his love for stories would now help bring peace and understanding to worlds far beyond Earth.